Scholastic NBC News Video, a video supplement of Scholastic News and Junior Scholastic. Our three branches of government. Here's NBC's Matt Lauer.
It all began with a piece of paper, the Constitution of the United States, an historic document written in 1787 by America's founding fathers and ratified a year later. The Constitution is the foundation of our government. That government touches just about every part of our lives, from the schools we attend to the roads we drive to the entertainment we watch. The people who wrote the Constitution had a plan. They didn't want a king or a queen telling them what to do, but they did want a strong government that listened to the needs and desires of all the people. They wanted a government that dispensed justice fairly and passed laws which would make our lives easier. As outlined in the Constitution, the United States of America has three main branches of government: the legislative branch, or Congress, which makes the laws; the executive branch, which is headed by the president and carries out the laws; and the judicial branch, which runs federal courts and decides whether or not the laws agree with the U.S. Constitution. The Founding Fathers designed each branch to have different duties and powers, but they made sure that no branch could become too powerful and take control of the others. This system of checks and balances has helped guarantee our freedom. We begin our exploration of the three branches of government with the legislative branch. Here's NBC's Lisa Myers.
It happens every other November.
Dick Zimmer.
TV ads, campaign speeches, and lots of promises.
I fight for children, and I fight for education, and I fight for senior citizens.
In exchange for votes, these politicians say they'll make our lives better. Many of them try to do that by winning a seat in the United States Congress, the powerful lawmaking or legislative branch of our federal government. Congress works here, in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. It is made up of two sections, the Senate and the House of Representatives. These two groups together create many of the laws and rules we live by, like the laws that help fight the spread of dangerous drugs, or laws to protect our endangered species. Congress also decides how our federal tax dollars are spent. Congress votes on the amount of money used to defend our country or to protect our wilderness. Congress decides how much to pay for government-sponsored school lunch programs and decides how much money should be spent to take a trip to Mars.
How you doing? I'm Carolyn McCarthy. I'm running for Congress. I hope you'll consider voting for me.
In November 1996, Carolyn McCarthy from New York ran for a seat in the House of Representatives.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure that our senior citizens are taken care of. Hi, how are
McCarthy
you?
decided to get involved in politics after her husband was gunned down while returning home from work on the local train.
How is your son? Kevin is doing fantastic.
Her son, who was with him, is now permanently disabled. Now that she's been elected, she wants to help pass more laws to make our streets safer.
Until our government listens to ordinary people speaking out against gun violence, we are not going to have safety in our streets. I will fight to keep the assault weapons ban the law of the land.
How you doing, sir? Good to see you.
J.C. Watts is a Republican congressman from Oklahoma. He ran for Congress to spread his message of family values.
As Republicans, we believe that the family is the primary, most essential part of American society. And we support safe schools where teachers and students can concentrate on the basics of education: reading, writing, mathematics, and the other fundamental disciplines that make a diploma something more than just a piece of paper. We will guarantee...
The people who come to Congress do it for many different reasons, and they come armed with different kinds of experience.
I got you, babe.
There's former pop star Sonny Bono, now congressman from California. Former welfare mother Lynn Woolsey.
Members of Congress.
Astronaut John Glenn. Actor Fred Thompson, and many more who come to the House and the Senate to serve their country. The House of Representatives is made up of 435 members. The Senate has 100 members, 2 from each state. The main job of both bodies is to make laws. Why do we have two groups of people doing the same thing? Well, the Founding Fathers thought it was the best way to make sure that big states and little states got a fair shake from the government. The House of Representatives is designed to represent each state based on population. The more people who live in a state, the more members to represent them. California, the most heavily populated state, also has the most members in the House, 52. Several states with small populations, such as Montana, South Dakota, and Delaware, have only one representative. But all states are equal in the Senate. Each state sends 2 senators to Washington, so big states like California, Texas, or New York cannot push around the less populated states. To run for the House of Representatives, you must be at least 25 years old and a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years. To be in the Senate, you must be at least 30 years old and a citizen for 9 years. But senators get to serve longer. They are elected to 6-year terms, while representatives in the House are elected for only 2 years. Although laws to limit terms have been proposed, members of both the Senate and House can run for re-election as many times as they want.
Tell the president and his White House crew to go back to the drawing boards.
Does no one pay any attention to what's going on in the world?
I oppose this because I believe it is fundamentally unfair.
Once somebody becomes a member of Congress, they have strong reasons to help their constituents or the voters who put them into office. They listen to complaints and help people when they have trouble with the government. But lawmaking is Congress's main priority. Because Congress is bicameral, which means it has 2 chambers, the process of lawmaking can be slow and difficult.
Bipartisanship requires coming at least halfway.
The Founding Fathers wanted it that way, to make sure that all laws got careful consideration. Bills can be introduced into either the House or the Senate. Let's follow a bill that has been introduced into the House. After a representative introduces the bill, it is given a number. Let's call this one House Bill number 1. And it is assigned to a committee made up of representatives. It is the committee's job to study the bill and decide whether or not to pass it on to the full House. Many bills never make it past the committee. When they do, the committee often makes changes or amendments to the original bill before passing it on. Let's say that House Bill number 1 is changed, but makes it through committee. It is then passed on to the full House. After several more weeks of debate, a majority in the House finally votes to approve House Bill 1. But that doesn't mean it becomes law. House Bill 1 now moves on to the Senate, where it starts the whole process over. A Senate committee must look at it. The full Senate can add its own changes before it votes on it. If the Senate's changes are different than the House amendments, House Bill 1 moves on to what's called a conference committee. The conference committee is made up of both representatives from the House and senators from the Senate. This committee must reach a compromise before House Bill 1 can be sent back to both the full House and the full Senate. If a majority of both chambers approves the bill, House Bill 1 is just one step away from becoming law. The last step in House Bill 1's journey comes in the President's office, the Oval Office. This is where the President has some power over what Congress does. If the President approves the bill, it becomes law. But if he rejects it or vetoes House Bill 1, the bill is stopped in its tracks. A vetoed bill has just one final shot at becoming law. The House and Senate can override the President's veto. To do that, 2/3 of both the House and the Senate must vote in favor of the vetoed bill. However, Congress seldom overrides presidential vetoes.
House will be in order.
There is no one leader who is in charge of both the House and Senate. Instead, each chamber has its own leaders.
Mr. Clerk, as chairman of the Democratic Caucus, I'm proud to present for election to the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives the Honorable Richard A. Gephardt, a representative-elect from the state of Missouri.
I am directed by the unanimous vote of the Republican Conference to present the name of the Honorable Newt Gingrich.
The Speaker of the House is the top official in the House of Representatives. He or she is elected by House members.
Nominee of their choice. The reading clerk will now call the roll.
Abercrombie. Gephardt. Ackerman.
Gephardt. Barr of Georgia. Gingrich. McHale. Gephardt. Porter of Illinois. Gingrich. Stark. Tiahrt. Waxman. Zimmer. Gingrich.
The Honorable Newt Gingrich of the state of Georgia is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Currently, Newt Gingrich of Georgia holds that post. The Speaker always belongs to the party that has the most members in the House. Since 1994, that has been the Republican Party.
As you might imagine, this is not a moment that I had been waiting for. With partnership, but with purpose, I pass this great gavel of our government. I now have the high honor and distinct privilege to present to the House of Representatives our new Speaker, the gentleman from Georgia, Newt Gingrich.
We're starting the 104th Congress. I don't know if you ever thought about just the concept. For 208 years, we gather together, the most diverse country in the history of the world. And the folks who come here by the one single act that their citizens freely chose them.
The Senate is organized differently. The President of the Senate is not elected by the members. The Constitution states that the Senate's chief presiding officer will be the nation's vice president. Currently, he's Vice President Al Gore. If there is ever a tie vote in the Senate, the vice president, as the top official of the Senate, casts the deciding vote.
The yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes yes.
The top elected official in the Senate is the Senate Majority Leader, a job currently held by Trent Lott of Mississippi. Like the House Speaker, the Majority Leader belongs to the political party with the most members in the Senate. And like Newt Gingrich, Lott is a Republican. There is also a role for students in Congress. Students can be congressional pages and work in both the House and the Senate. That tradition dates back more than 200 years, as this video from the House Page program explains.
Young boys, some only 10 to 12 years old, were assigned to work for the House of Representatives. While a page's life can be rewarding, it can also be hectic and exhausting. Since pages must continue their high school education, their day begins early at 6:45 with accelerated classes until mid-morning when the House normally convenes. Their workday continues until the House adjourns, usually around dinner time, but sometimes late into the evening. In 1982, a congressional committee recommended that pages be required to live in a facility established exclusively for them. Like their predecessors, House pages primarily serve as messengers, but thanks to modern technology, their specific duties have changed considerably. The inkwells and oil lamps that had to be filled each day are gone. Candles are no longer needed on members' desks during night sessions. And the horses and bicycles the pages use to deliver urgent messages around Washington have been replaced by telephones and computers. The first job assignment of the day for all pages is to place copies of the previous day's congressional record under each member's seat. Then they report for one of several specific jobs. Bench or runner pages are seen on and off the floor, running errands between the offices of members of the House and congressional committees. Between assignments, these pages sit on benches in the rear of the chamber, where a switchboard lighting system summons them to assist individual members. A buzzer system is used by members to call floor pages who run errands within the Capitol and are responsible for seeing that materials reach the vans that shuttle among the various offices around Capitol Hill.
The U.S. Constitution gives the House powers that the Senate does not share. For instance, all bills designed to raise money for the U.S. government must begin in the House of Representatives. However, the Senate also has special powers that are not shared by the House. For instance, senators alone must approve all treaties made with other countries. Also, it is up to the Senate to approve important presidential appointments, such as nominees to the Supreme Court. The Constitution says the House and Senate must split the chores on a very unpleasant task: removing a president from office. It is up to the House to impeach or bring official charges against the president. It is then up to the Senate to hold a trial on those charges.
We are beginning these hearings today in an atmosphere of utmost gravity.
But Congress rarely tries to remove a president from office. It can only happen if the president has committed serious crimes. Although no president has ever been officially removed from office by Congress, two have come close.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Some believe that in 1974, President Richard Nixon would have been impeached and removed from office because of the Watergate scandal, but he resigned before that could happen. And in 1868, President Andrew Johnson was impeached by the House, but the Senate failed to remove him from office by one vote. It's hard to believe that a system set up over 200 years ago can still be relevant today. But Congress still works under exactly the same rules carved out by our founding fathers.
The executive branch of government is headed by the President of the United States. For more on this important branch, we hear from NBC's Jim Miklaszewski.
It was in July of 1963 that I went to Washington and met President Kennedy at the Boys Nation program. And he came out and, made a few little comments. We were all standing there in alphabetical order, so Arkansas was near the front of the line.
When President Clinton was a young boy, he knew he wanted to become President of the United States, just like his idol, President John F. Kennedy. It's a dream shared by many, but achieved by only a few.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Unlike members of Congress who are elected from their own states, the President is elected every 4 years by citizens all across the U.S. That means he's accountable to all of the American people. Candidates who run for president need to meet these three qualifications. They must be at least 35 years old, a natural-born U.S. citizen, and have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. John F. Kennedy was 43 when he became president in 1961 and remains our youngest elected president.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The president has many roles and responsibilities. The president is the chief executive. That means it's his or her job to enforce federal laws, develop federal policies, and appoint federal officials. It's also the president's responsibility to prepare a national budget. The president serves as commander-in-chief, in charge of the armed forces, although it's the job of Congress to declare war. The president is the chief of state. He or she meets with leaders of other countries as our representative. The president is the head of his or her political party. Presidents are in charge of the executive branch. This branch is made up of the executive office of the president, 14 executive departments, and more than 100 independent agencies. The executive office is made up of agencies that work directly for the president and who advise him on many subjects. The 14 major departments, including the Education Department, the Defense Department, and the Treasury Department, help the president put laws into action. So do more than 100 independent agencies, like NASA and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Almost 3 million civilians work in the executive branch. Perhaps the president's most important job is to work together with Congress to make and pass laws. Although the president does not have the power to make laws, only Congress can create a bill that can become law. He or she can propose them and work actively to get them passed. If a president doesn't like the bill, he can refuse to put it into action or veto it. However, if enough members of Congress disagree with the president, they can override his veto and put the law into effect anyway.
The reading clerk will now call the roll.
One of the major challenges presidents have to face is how to be effective within the framework of a checks and balance system of government. Money is one area where Congress always has the upper hand over the president. The Constitution gives Congress the exclusive power to raise taxes and spend public money. However, the president heads up a massive executive branch and needs a lot of money to run it. Sometimes Congress and the president don't see eye to eye. In the early 1990s, Republican President George Bush wanted to spend money on defense that the democratically controlled Congress was against. A few years later, Democratic President Clinton wanted to spend money on the environment and college loans that the Republican-dominated Congress was against.
And politics must stop at the schoolhouse door.
The office of president carries with it overwhelming demands. Presidents must tackle many crises, as well as develop long-term policies.
The problems are more difficult than I imagined them to be. It's much easier to make the speeches than it is to finally make the judgments, because unfortunately your advisors are frequently divided. If you take the wrong course, and on occasion I have, the president bears the burden, responsibility quite rightly.
But the president also has advantages. Since he's only one person, and while Congress is made up of 535 people, it's much easier for the president to make decisions and move quickly on problems. Some presidents have managed to use their powers in bold and creative ways that have shaped this country for the better. George Washington, our first president, helped to shape the presidency when he stepped down after 2 four-year terms. When Thomas Jefferson, our third president, bought the Louisiana Territory from France in 1803, he almost doubled the size of our country overnight. Abraham Lincoln led the nation through the painful Civil War, when the United States was threatening to divide into 2 nations over the issue of slavery. Theodore Roosevelt set up the National Park System to preserve some of our nation's natural treasures. Franklin D. Roosevelt told the nation,
"Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself."
when the U.S. was in the darkest hours of the economic crisis called the Depression. He came up with a series of Get People Back to Work projects called the New Deal. During that time, he called a special session of Congress known as the 100 Days, when Congress passed dozens of bills aimed at improving the economy. He got Congress to spend billions of dollars on relief projects and started Social Security.
It is your problem, my friends, no less than it is mine. Together, we cannot fail.
It is common for people to say that the vice president is only a heartbeat away from the job of the president. That's because the vice president's most important job is to be there in case the president dies or cannot serve out his term. 8 vice presidents became president because the current president died. And one vice president, Gerald Ford, became president in 1974 because President Richard Nixon resigned. The vice president is elected at the same time as the president, but there's usually little for the vice president to do once he is elected. The only formal duty he has is to preside over the Senate. John Adams, our first vice president, complained, "My country has in its wisdom contrived for me the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived or his imagination conceived." But in recent years, vice presidents have taken on more duties. John F. Kennedy's vice president, Lyndon Johnson, was chairman of NASA. President Bush's vice president, Dan Quayle, was a close advisor to the president on matters of government regulations. Our current vice president, Al Gore, has a top role in the Clinton administration. He headed a huge commission about government waste and has led efforts in aid of environmental issues. So what will happen with the presidency in the future? So far, all of our presidents have been white men. But many predict the day will come when a person of color and a woman will lead the country as president. Unlike Congress, the president can only serve 2 four-year terms. President Clinton cannot run again. That means a new president will be elected in the year 2000. Whoever that is will surely face a challenging new century ahead.
While the Congress and the President have a lot to say in lawmaking, our courts enforce or carry out those laws. For more on the judicial branch of government, here's NBC's Pete Williams.
In the 1950s, most public facilities in the United States, including schools, were segregated by race. White students often attended the best schools, while many blacks had to make do with run-down, poorly funded ones. But in 1954, the United States Supreme Court began to change all that. In a historic decision, the case of Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, the court said black school children have a right to attend white schools anywhere in the country. It took many years for the effects of Brown versus Board of Education to be felt.
At 9:25, with a military escort party, still in a strange quiet, 6 Negro girls, 3 Negro boys entered Central High School. A court order carried out with the federal government using its ultimate power.
And the changes it helped bring about were often wrenching for the United States. Today, it's hard to believe that there was such a time in U.S. history. But Supreme Court decisions like that one throughout our nation's history have helped bring us closer to the goal of equal justice for all. The legislative branch, Congress, makes the laws, and the executive branch, led by the President, carries them out. But it's up to the judicial branch, headed by the Supreme Court, to make sure that those laws, and state laws as well, follow the U.S. Constitution. As the nation's highest court, the Supreme Court has the final word on all legal cases and controversies.
We generally don't take easy cases around here. We take cases, generally speaking, because other courts around the country have reached conflicting results on that issue. And most of the cases we take are ones in which very good arguments can be made on each side of the question.
Today's Supreme Court has 9 members, although when the first Supreme Court was formed in 1789, there were only 6. The Constitution does not set any age or citizenship requirements for the people who can sit on the Supreme Court, but it does say that the President must appoint Supreme Court justices and that the Senate must approve them. Most Supreme Court justices have been top judges, lawyers, and law professors, and the Senate usually confirms any nominee the President puts forward, but not always. 14 Supreme Court nominees have been rejected by the Senate. The Chief Justice is the top official on the Supreme Court. Since 1986, the Chief Justice has been William H. Rehnquist. The Chief Justice has little formal authority over how the 8 associate justices on the court write their opinions.
But of course, I have no power of contempt, no power of any sort. And if they disagree and get very excited and want to start talking back and forth to one another before everyone has spoken, there's nothing in the world that can stop them except kind of a frown.
Except a frown.
Each of the 9 justices is allowed only 1 vote in deciding how to rule on a particular case. The Founding Fathers wanted to make sure that members of the Supreme Court would not be afraid to make unpopular rulings. So the Constitution gives Supreme Court members unlimited terms of office. Once they're appointed, justices can serve until they retire or die. And the Congress and the President cannot punish justices by lowering their pay. They can only be removed from the court by Congress if they've been convicted of serious crimes. The Supreme Court's main power is its authority to rule local, state, and federal laws unconstitutional. That power, called judicial review, is not spelled out in the Constitution. The process of judicial review was actually established by the Supreme Court itself in a famous 1803 decision called Marbury versus Madison. Because of that, some scholars have claimed that the Supreme Court's power to strike down laws is itself unconstitutional. But others point out that judicial review is implied in the Constitution, and today the court's authority to rule on constitutional matters is uncontested. But the court cannot reach out across the country to look for laws it considers unconstitutional. The court must wait for cases to come from what are called the lower courts, the network of federal and state courts where the day-to-day trials take place. There are also appeals courts which review trials to make sure that people get a fair shake. The Supreme Court is the highest appeals court in the U.S. Supreme Court decisions carry the force of law. There are only 3 ways to change a Supreme Court decision: by passing a new law, by amending or changing the Constitution, or by a later ruling from the Supreme Court itself. That's exactly what happened in Brown versus Board of Education. The Supreme Court reversed an earlier decision by an earlier Supreme Court. In 1896, in a case called Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court had ruled that it was okay for states to have separate but equal facilities for whites and blacks. That ruling opened the door for widespread racial segregation, especially in the South. But 58 years later, in Brown versus Board of Education, the court ruled that racially separate schools were obviously unequal, and so they were unconstitutional. While many decisions made by the country's highest courts have righted some wrongs, at least one historic decision may have sparked a war. It was called the Dred Scott case. In 1846, a Missouri slave named Dred Scott tried to sue for his freedom when his master took him to a territory where slavery was outlawed. Scott argued that living in a free territory made him a free man. He took his case from state court to federal court and finally the Supreme Court, where the justices ruled that he could not sue for his freedom because he was a slave, not a citizen. That ruling is considered the court's worst decision in its entire history. It widened the gap between the North and the South and was among the causes of the American Civil War. These days, Supreme Court decisions are often topics of heated debate, but few shots are fired. The Supreme Court's work year begins the first Monday in October and usually runs through June of the next year. The highest court gets thousands of requests or petitions from people who want their cases heard, but only a tiny fraction of those cases are ever accepted and ruled on. During a 2-week period, justices may listen to as many as 18 to 20 cases. And, as in any appeals court, there is no evidence presented. Instead of arguing about the evidence to a jury, lawyers before the Supreme Court get 30 minutes to persuade the justices that there's a flaw in the law or that a particular law was incorrectly applied. Afterward, the justices talk over the case among themselves and decide how they will vote on it. Then they write their opinions about the case. A formal opinion of the majority vote is always written. If some justices disagree with the majority opinion and feel there's an important point to make, they will write a dissenting opinion. These opinions can become inspirations for decisions in future cases. For the court's first 178 years, only white men were chosen to be justices. And then in 1967, President Lyndon Johnson appointed the court's first African American, Thurgood Marshall. Marshall had been one of the lawyers on the winning side of Brown versus Board of Education. Clarence Thomas was the second African American justice.
I, Clarence Thomas.
I, Clarence Thomas.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
President Ronald Reagan named the first woman to the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor, in 1981. She has since been joined by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was appointed by President Clinton in 1993.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Unlike our elected politicians, Supreme Court justices rarely go before the cameras or make comments in the newspapers. Their most important public statements are their written opinions, made after careful thought and study. That's important because a ruling from the nation's highest court can have an impact on our future and on the futures of generations to come.
Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the U.S. Constitution set out to describe the powers and the duties of the three branches of government. But it is the people of the United States of America who have the greatest power. But that power can only be exercised when we, as Americans, take our democratic responsibilities seriously. For our government is only as strong and as free as its people.
Scholastic NBC News Video, a video supplement of Scholastic News and Junior Scholastic. Japan, land of tradition, land of progress. Reported by NBC's Ann Curry.
Japan, an island country, the most developed in Asia. The Japanese call it Nippon, which means source of the sun. The sun rising over the scenic country is the symbol depicted in the Japanese flag. There are 4 main islands which make up Japan. Hokkaido in the north has a climate like that of Alaska. Honshu, the largest, is the most populated. It is home to the capital city of Tokyo. Below Honshu is Shikoku, the smallest of the 4 major islands. Kyushu lies farthest south and has a subtropical climate. Thousands of smaller islands make up the rest of the country. Japan is separated from its neighbors, Korea, China, and Russia, by the Sea of Japan. 12,388 feet above sea level, the volcano Mount Fuji is Japan's highest peak. Volcanic activity and earthquakes are common in Japan. In recent years, most of the volcanic eruptions and earthquakes have been minor, but in 1995, a quake in the large city of Kobe toppled buildings, destroyed homes, and injured thousands. Over 1,000 small earthquakes occur each year. Our visit to Japan will show us a country that is steeped in tradition, yet modern in many ways. Ancient customs from a culture that goes back thousands of years coexist with modern, mostly Western influences. It has one of the highest standards of living in the world, yet most of its people have never left the island country. It is a leader in technology, yet still holds on to its old-style monarch. Almost 3/4 of Japan is mountainous, and most of the 125 million residents live in the flat areas near the coasts. Because it is so crowded, the Japanese live very closely together. As a result, they greatly value the ability to get along with each other and to go along with the group. And unlike America, which is multicultural and multiracial, Japan's people are very similar. They share the same history, language, and tradition. Over many centuries, Japan has integrated many aspects of language, art, religion, and culture from China, its neighbor. For example, Japan borrowed the Chinese system of writing. Instead of writing with letters, the Japanese use characters, which are derived from pictures. Japanese students must learn nearly 2,000 characters to graduate from high school. Most Japanese practice 2 religions, Buddhism, an ancient religion brought to Japan by the Chinese, and Shinto, the worship of nature. Japan also imported from China the idea of having an emperor rule the nation. Emperors ruled Japan from ancient times until the 12th century. At that time, shoguns, or military rulers, started to run the country. They kept the emperor largely as a figurehead with no real power. The shoguns hired samurai warriors to protect them. They were a lot like medieval knights. They were fierce, loyal fighters and expert horsemen. The samurai were taught that it is better to die on the battlefield than to surrender. During the 700 years that the shoguns dominated Japan, they were distrustful of the outside world. No one was allowed to leave the country, and few foreigners were allowed to enter. Then in 1853, American warships under the command of Commodore Matthew Perry reached the Japanese coast. Perry demanded that the country be open to trade and diplomatic relations. The Japanese agreed, reluctantly at first, but by the 1870s, the shoguns had lost power and the emperor began to modernize the country. By the early 1900s, Japan was a technologically advanced world power. During the 1930s, Japan's military leaders took control of the government. Its leaders were determined to build an empire for Japan. They thought that such an empire would supply the country with the raw materials like oil and metal that it lacked. But its relations with other countries were strained. In 1937, Japan began a war in China. Then, with its eye on the Pacific, Japan once again became the aggressor. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, while Japanese troops swept through Southeast Asia. The attack destroyed many ships and stunned the United States. The U.S. then entered World War II. At first, the Japanese drive for dominance succeeded. Japanese troops committed many atrocities against the countries that they occupied, killing hundreds of thousands of people. Finally, the U.S. and its allies turned the tide. After a disastrous battle on the island of Okinawa, where thousands of American and Japanese soldiers died, The Allies defeated the Japanese. Japan was bombarded by American warplanes. Major ports and cities were destroyed. The war came to an end in August of 1945 when America dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing close to 200,000 people. The country was left in ruins. Almost every city had been flattened by bombing and fire. Tokyo, the capital city, was burned to the ground. For the first time in its history, Japan was a conquered nation. Emperor Hirohito conceded defeat. Thousands of Allied prisoners were released by their captives. U.S. forces occupied Japan for the next 7 years. After the war, under the leadership of General Douglas MacArthur, the U.S. Army commander in the Pacific, Japan drafted a new constitution. It stated that the Japanese people forever renounce war and the threat or use of force. Today, Japan still has only an army for defensive purposes. The government also underwent reform. Now the Japanese have a democratic form of government. The legislature, called the Diet, is similar to the U.S. Congress. The Diet elects the Prime Minister, the head of the country. Japan's current Prime Minister, elected in 1996, is Ryutaro Hashimoto. Despite the dramatic changes in the country after World War II, Japan still clung to the tradition of keeping an emperor. Emperor Hirohito remained in the imperial palace until his death in 1989. He was succeeded by his son, Crown Prince Akihito, who is the present emperor. Although the emperor is highly respected, he is merely a symbol for the country and has no real power over the government. Many Japanese resented the American soldiers who occupied their country after World War II. But Japan and the United States have gone from being the fiercest of enemies to the strongest of allies. In fact, today, America is returning military installations to Japan at their request, and the U.S. government is pressing Japan to take a bigger security role at home and abroad. In the post-war years, Japan rebuilt itself as a world power. In 1956, Japan was admitted to the United Nations. And during the 1960s, Japan's economy grew about 10% a year, and Japan once again became a powerful industrialized country. In 1964, Japan hosted the Olympics, the first time any Asian country had done so. It had reclaimed its place as a world leader. Japan is now the second wealthiest country after the United States. It has invested some of that wealth overseas, particularly in the U.S. Japanese companies have spent billions of dollars buying real estate, office buildings, and businesses in the U.S., even in Hawaii, some 50 years after its attack on the island. Japanese companies such as Sony, Nissan, Toyota, and Honda are household names all over the world. Japanese cars, TVs, stereos, VCRs, and other electronic goods are among the most popular exports. Have you heard of electronic pets like Tamagotchis? This Japanese toy is very popular in the U.S., along with computer games made by Sony and Nintendo. And the Japanese have been using robots in the workplace to help make jobs easier. There is even a Japanese RoboCop to direct traffic on crowded city streets. Because of the steep terrain, only 15% of the total land in Japan is suitable for farming. Most farms are small, but very productive. Rice is the most important crop, and fishing has always been a key industry in Japan. Fish is the main source of protein for the Japanese people. Overall, Japan has few natural resources and must import from other countries what it cannot produce itself. But Japan has a resource that has made it powerful despite any limitations. Its people. The real key to Japan's amazing post-war recovery and its continued success is the hard work of the Japanese people themselves. The Japanese are known for working long hours. A typical workday begins with morning exercises, often on the work site. Then, throughout the day, employees work cooperatively. It is not a competitive workplace. Decisions are made by the group, not by individuals. Japanese companies are very productive and are always seeking to improve their products. Employees usually stay with a company for life. The downside of the Japanese work ethic is that many people tend to be workaholics. Families usually eat dinner without the father, who often works late, 6 days a week. Nonetheless, these values, hard work, self-discipline, teamwork, and obedience, have paid off, and Japanese children are taught at a young age to follow in this same way. First of all, they study a lot. The Japanese are well educated. 99% read and write. Children usually go to school 6 days a week. Even preschool children are being prepared for the future. These children are being taught to be tough, to be able to handle the stresses of life in Japan. They attend classes, and to prove their toughness, they even play in the snow wearing little clothing. Their parents feel that they should not be babied or have life made too easy for them. By the time a Japanese student is in high school, she knows how tough the competition is. Only the best students will be admitted to the leading universities. The others advance to private schools. Big Japanese companies and the government select workers from the highest-ranking universities. The competition to get into these schools is fierce, for one's future is directly tied to performance in school. Some students begin studying for exams 3 or 4 years in advance at special private cram schools. Wearing headbands that say things like success and must win, they study 6 and 7 days a week, even on vacation. Is it worth it?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of studying, but everybody does it, so you don't really feel like that's too much.
But some students, especially those that have attended schools outside Japan, aren't so sure.
Since you have so much pressure, you just panic, and instead of really learning, you just memorize, and that's all that happens.
Don't worry. Be happy.
For some students, that pressure is too intense. Some teens rebel by trying to be different from the crowd, different from the traditional. Japanese young people are influenced by Western culture, mostly from the United States. Their music reflects what they hear from America, from pop to country. American Hank Williams Jr. is popular in Japan. His concerts sell out quickly, as his fans croon along with him. Disney Asia draws crowds to see its familiar American characters, and Sesame Street is considered to be a good way to learn English. And the eating habits of the Japanese have changed. While rice and fish are still the main staples of the Japanese diet, they eat a fair amount of hamburgers, fried chicken, and pizza, even if it does have chicken teriyaki on top. And while Japanese women will still wear the traditional kimono for special occasions, they are seen less frequently. The cost of a formal kimono can run as high as $15,000, and many women rent them now when they are needed. Most teens dress like Americans, often paying top dollar for jeans and clothing from the States brought to Japan by stores like LL Bean and Levi. For recreation, the Japanese still love to attend sumo wrestling matches, the country's oldest sport. But the favorite pastime is baseball. Kids love to play the game, and many dream of one day becoming professional baseball players. A competition is held each year among high schools. To win is a great honor. To lose can leave some in disgrace. All dream of being successful players, and maybe even joining an American team, like Dodger Hideo Nomo and new Yankee pitcher Hideki Urabu have done. Japanese adults relax by attending theater to see kabuki plays, where all the roles are played by men. The artisans of Japan bring pleasure to many with their attention to detail. Craftsmen make exquisite lacquerware that can be found in many Japanese homes. Because the country is so crowded, houses and apartments are usually small and simply decorated. Marriages in Japan used to be arranged by the parents, but today more people marry for love, choosing their own mates. Even the emperor's son, Crown Prince Naruhito, broke with tradition and married his love, this Harvard-educated commoner, Masakio Owada. The future of women also holds more promise. Women were once treated much like servants. Now women, while still observing some customs, no longer walk 3 feet behind a man. They have freedom to have smaller families and to choose careers, although most of the best jobs are still given to men. Just as the Japanese still value age-old customs, they have also been taught to revere their older citizens. There is even a national holiday to honor them. The number of senior citizens is fast growing as people live longer lives, and as the seniors pass on traditions like the tea ceremonies or the many annual festivals that are held, The young incorporate their image of what modern-day Japan is with the long-held beliefs of their parents and ancestors. As the year 2000 approaches, Japan will look as much to the future as it has to the past. The country is expected to remain a leader in the modern world. In 1998, Japan hosts the 17th Winter Olympics, the last Olympics of the 20th century. As the world looks on, Japan will continue to dazzle the world with its technology, its bullet trains, its indoor ocean beach, its electronic gadgets. But it will also be a time for Japan to demonstrate its ability to remain true to its heritage, even as it opens its doors to the future.
Scholastic NBC News Video, a video supplement of Scholastic News and Junior Scholastic. Closing the Racial Divide.
Racial bias, where does it come from? The home, the media? Is it learned behavior, or are we born with it?
President Clinton called the divide of race America's constant curse. How does the racial divide impact our own lives? And more important, how are our children affected?
We'll find out this hour as we provide this open forum for kids and for some experts. Let's begin by making some introductions. First, starting with our panel, left to right, Harvard professor Cornel West, one of the nation's leading scholars in Afro-American studies and author of the book, Race Matters. Lorraine Gaunt, New Jersey elementary school teacher and founder of a special program on diversity, It's Okay to Be Different. Chris Zorich, defensive tackle for football's Chicago Bears. He started his own foundation to help needy children. Chuck D, co-founder of the rap group Public Enemy, who just signed on as a commentator for Fox News. Valeria Lovelace, a pioneer in children's television, winning 5 Emmys as Director of Research for Sesame Street. And Bill Bradley, former United States Senator from New Jersey for 18 years. Before that, he played 10 seasons with the New York Knicks and been outspoken on matters of race.
Now let's talk process. We've got a few vignettes to show you, everyday scenes from everyday life. After we play the scene, we'll ask the kids to respond to a question by using their handsets. We'll quickly tabulate the responses and hear more from our young people as well as from our panel. Tim, I'll walk over to the kids while you set up the first video.
Go get them, Gwen. The setting for our first video is a school lunchroom. Dan and Sean have been best friends since preschool. Dan is black, Sean is white. It's now the first day in a new school, lunchtime. Let's see what happens.
How's that music class? Oh, it's really good because, you know, Mr. Gillespie's teaching piano lessons now, so it's really good.
Sean, you sit over here.
What's up? It's going. Hey, Dan. See.
Hey, Dan, sit over here.
Hey, damn it. What's the problem?
Sit with us.
Now the question, where should Dan sit? Take your handsets that we provided you and press 1 if you think he should sit with his black friends. Press 2 if you think he should sit with Sean. It's a tough choice.
While the kids are casting their votes, let me turn to our panel. Chuck D, what does that video mean? What is the kid going through right now?
Well, the kid is going, the young person is going through a situation where increasingly by the years, education-wise or economically, there's more things that resemble the Great Divide in America. So you know, right now, as people grow into being adults, they're growing into hanging on to these areas where they think that, you know, maybe, you know, being American or being an adult in America, you have to hang on to old institutions. So really, he has a decision that he has to make, but I would like to say that he just should be honest with Sean, introduce Sean to everybody, go to the table, you know, where the black kids sit, build with them. Today, it's a lot more open than it was 20 years ago, and that's how he should think. Just be honest as possible and, you know, have the chips fall where they may.
Chris Zorge, Bill Bradley, you were both athletes, played with teams that had black and white members. Have you ever faced a situation where there was kind of a tug? You wanted to sit with a friend, but there are black guys here, white guys here?
Actually, ironically, it happened to me twice. One when I was a freshman at the University of Notre Dame. I had a roommate, his name was Kent Graham. He was white, and it was our first team dinner. And he went before me, and I had to get like some extra pudding or extra fruit or something like that. And I came back to our lunch area, and he was sitting with a group of white people, and there was a group of black teammates also. And so I came there, and I figured, oh, he's my roommate, and I'm sitting there thinking, I was like, well, I grew up in an all-black environment. Where do I go? Well, I wound up sitting with Kent. And then the following day, some of the guys come up and say, hey, Chris, you're supposed to sit with us. I was like, well, we're supposed to sit with us. That's my friend. So actually, the following day, I went and sat with my black teammates. So I was kind of going back and forth the whole time. So, and unfortunately, as I said before, it just happened recently, the same exact thing. Unfortunately, normally we all sit together, but there's a smaller hotel, so they had 2 rooms for us to have dinner in. And I came down, and I was hanging with one of my black teammates, and it was for dinner, and I looked around, it was all the white players in one room, and all the black players were in another. So unfortunately,
many didn't know that your mom was white, but your dad was black.
Exactly, exactly.
Bill Bradley, what's going on in Sean and Dan's minds as they try to determine who sits where?
I think that he's faced with a decision that millions of people are faced with, and that is, do you have to choose here? And he's deciding, how am I going to choose? As opposed to saying, how can I change this conflict that I have to confront? And he, I think, hasn't seen that there's another way, which is what Chuck D said, and the white was to say, come on, let's all of us go to another table. And that table is where black and white sit together.
If you look at our screen, you'll see that we have the answers to the question, where should Dan sit? 3% of them said he should sit with his black friends. 97% of them said he should sit with his white friend, Sean. Now that's kind of interesting. They thought that who are these black kids to be forcing him into a corner? How'd you vote and why?
I figured that if he was better friends with Sean and he was more comfortable with him, then he should be eating lunch with him.
Even if these kids were saying, hey, listen, it's a matter of racial identity, come sit over here?
They're not supposed to be telling him what to do. It's his own decision.
Let me ask Professor Cornell West, are you surprised by this result?
Yeah, I actually thought he would be a bit more tension, really. We had almost 100% saying going with the friend. And I think that in our society that the divide is such that many of us are much more tortured, really. On the one hand, we want to be true to ourselves, which is the most important thing in life. And on the other hand, we also recognize that you in no way want to be viewed as someone who rejects certain kind of context. And if, for example, the black students felt that by sitting with his friend, he was rejecting them, then that's even more pressure. Which means the next day, for example, he's got to go back and let them know that by sitting here, I'm not rejecting you. I'm simply here with my partner and having to be a white brother. And the next day, I'm going to sit with the black folk. And the next day, the white brother may have to sit at the black table. You see, it's got to be one that moves around and becomes multi-contextual. We can move from one context to the next. And so I actually thought that it might be a much more tougher divide than it was.
Senator Bill Bradley, 80% of the players in the NBA are now black Americans. Do you think there's a perception in America that blacks are, quote, better athletes?
Yes, I think there's that perception, but I reflect a couple of months ago, I spoke somewhere and a guy came up to me and said he was Nat Holman's friend. He's one of the original great basketball players, happens to be Jewish, and he gave me a headline of a newspaper, and the headline said, "Why do Jews dominate basketball?" The point is, it comes out of the circumstance of people's lives. People are hungrier. If they work more at it, they succeed. And I don't think there's any inherent biological reason why 80% of the NBA is African American. I think it comes out of the experience of the individual people, the role models that have been out there, how they see they can get ahead, where they've started from in the beginning, and what they see they can achieve for themselves, and how many other avenues of American life are closed still to that kind of energy and dedication to African Americans.
When it comes to race, do we sometimes overreact? Let's take a look at our next video, and then we'll ask some questions.
If you guys need some help, just let me know.
All right. We're just looking.
If there's something you're looking for, I could probably help you with it.
All right.
Look, don't take the record out of the jacket, okay?
Okay, get your handsets ready. Do you believe the store owner is racist? Press number 1 for yes, press number 2 for no. While we're waiting to see how the rest of you voted, let me ask now, do you think the store owner was racist in the way he treated the black male? Let's go to you. We haven't heard from you yet.
I think that he was a little unfair to the black male, and I also think that it really wasn't, he should have given like a little more fairness, and he should have let each one of them have an equal chance in the store.
Why do you think the store owner reacted that way?
I'm really not sure. Maybe he was just like racist and he wanted to give the colored male a hard time.
You know, when I was in a store last week, I was a little insulted. I was paying good money for good clothing, and the woman asked me to show my ID. She called my home number, and she wanted my address, and she didn't do that for anybody around me. So I've been in this situation, and I don't know whether the woman was racist or just overcautious. What do you think?
Well, I don't know if, like, I don't think it was right. It was right what he did, but it might just be the way he was, you know, how he was brought up, you know, in the society he lived in. He was, you know, he was taught that, you know, that blacks are more likely to steal or something than whites. And
I believe he just did. I think he thought the black male was going to try and steal it. The way he just immediately went over there and said, "Do you need any help?" and don't take the record out of the box.
Has this happened to anybody else here? Let's find out what you all said in your votes. Do you believe the store owner is racist? Boy, you are a uniform crowd. 93% said yes, 7% said no. I'm curious about who thinks that the guy was justified in what he was doing, the store owner. All of a sudden, no one feels this way. Okay, that's all right. We'll go back over to Tim. I want to hear what the panel has to say.
Someone knows how it feels to be in the minority. Let's turn to our panel. Chuck D., what if that store owner had caught 6 black kids stealing records over the last month? Would you change your attitude?
I mean, you know, we're going on a lot of what ifs. I mean, we could go on Dan had a bad day. I mean, but yeah, that's taken in consideration. But I think the panel, I mean, the crowd said they thought he was racist just for the fact that the young black kid, the young white kid came in there together, and he, you know, was stressing the young black kid, you know, instead of, you know, at least saying, okay, I'm gonna, you know, stress both of you guys. But you know, of course, you know, if you're going to just look at the one guy and he's the black kid, you know, then that shows you have racial overtones in your actions.
Cornel West, this kind of selective prosecution, shall we say, scrutiny, is it commonplace?
Unfortunately, I think it is. I think that one of the dominant stereotypes of young black brothers is one of being a criminal. And therefore, there's a whole history of trying to keep close surveillance. Now, we know in any society, poor people commit a disproportionate amount of crime. That's anywhere you go. So in America, you do have poor people, disproportionately black and brown, who commit a higher percentage of crime. But each black person is a new black person. But that stereotype applies across the board, you see. And unfortunately, we still find ourselves oftentimes having to struggle to overcome that ugly stereotype.
Bill Bradley.
I think the flip side of this question, which was, do you think his action is racist, is the issue of white skin privilege. People want to know what that is. It's the opposite of discrimination. You discriminate against an African American, for example, but a white person has white skin privilege. The white skin privilege in this case was a white kid can walk into that store and be presumed innocent until proven guilty. A black kid walks into that store and he takes on his back all the stereotypes that exist in society. He takes on his back whatever was the selective headline of the day and whatever is the reality out there. When Eiffel, when she goes into the store, she has to answer for the worst part of the African American population, whereas the white kid does not have to answer for the worst part of the white population. That's what's called white skin privilege.
A few of our teen panelists here said that this has happened to them when they've gone into stores. And I wonder if there's anybody who wants to describe to me an example of when that happened. Go back here to this young man.
Yeah, it happened to me plenty of times, and I walked in stores and they're watching me and everybody's looking at me and they have a big mirror pointing directly at me. And it's real sad to know that after so many years that it's still going on, and it's obvious that it's never going to end, that it's just going to continue from beginning to end of the world.
You don't think that kids your age could make it better, the next generations?
Well, I think they could, but what I did was I just stopped going to the store.
You just said, I'll keep my money in my pocket?
Yeah, I mean, some stores, they won't even let you in unless you show them some money.
Does it make you angry?
It makes me mad, and I was real mad when it happened to me. I was mad.
Any other experiences like that? I'll tip right here, since you're right here.
That happened to me before, but it's like anytime I go into the store, they will follow me. They think I might steal something. But if I go in with my friend, and he's light-skinned, they be like, they don't even watch it. They pay him no mind. They just pay directly to me.
Even though your friend is black, but he's lighter skinned?
Right. And then, so when I leave, they ready to check to make sure I ain't putting that in my pocket. So it's like, that's in my own neighborhood. I go there like all the time, but now my mom said, just stop going there, because I almost got into a conflict with the store owner.
Valeria, in your experience dealing with children, when they experience something like that, being singled out unfairly by a store owner, what does it do to them? What does it do to their psyche?
Well, I think so far in the discussion, the children were pretty open in terms of looking at racial attitudes and opinions and things like that. This is one of those kinds of experiences that begins to turn the tide in their thinking. And they begin to sometimes go within themselves and look for their identity. And this is when, like you see the kids pull away from the major culture and go within themselves about their own culture, learn their own traditions, go to their black friends, withdraw from the major society, because these are the types of things that will empower them to know more about their culture, to know more about their songs, to know more about their heroes.
Cornell West.
Yeah, I think, and what I used to tell my son is always treat people with respect and demand respect. So if you feel as if you're not receiving respect, I would have told the store owner, you don't plan to be in business that long. Because if you treat your consumers like this, they're not going to come. I demand respect. I'm going to a store where I can be respected. Whoever owns that store, black owner, white owner, brown owner, what have you. I'm a human being. But you also treat them with respect. It's got to be mutual.
Let's look at our final scene. It begins on a commercial street with a mother and a child taking a stroll. Watch what happens.
Where are we going to go today? Huh? Where are we going to?
Pick up Daddy.
Huh? Pick up Daddy?
Yeah. Everyone, it's nighttime. Then drop Daddy off.
Come on over here, Shannon.
I have to get my
Okay.
mom. And then I have to drop off. And then
Uh-huh. Then what are we going to do?
Now, what we just saw happen there is something that we've all seen happen a lot. What did you think that mother did, and you think that was okay for her to do that?
No, because if a black lady and a child was walking down the street, I don't think it would be right for him to. I think she did that because she saw how he was listening to rap music and the clothes that he was wearing.
And if you walked down the street, say you were old enough to have a little girl, and you were walking down the street and you saw him, you wouldn't get nervous?
No.
Would you get nervous if you saw this kid walking, white or black, walking down the street towards you?
No, I wouldn't. But I figured that people, they always judge people by the cover of their skin and by what they wear. Like if you wear baggy jeans and all that stuff, they all say, oh, well, this person, she's a hoodlum or he's a hoodlum, and they have no home training. You can't always judge a book by its cover.
Was she justified at all in what she did?
I don't really think so. I think it was just a stereotype of what she thought the guy was. She thought he was maybe gonna mug her or something, and like jump her or something. But I think it's just a stereotype for some people. It's like,
Well, to be totally honest, I have been known to drive down the street, see a young man of indeterminate race approaching my car. It's made me nervous enough that I have locked my doors. Can you imagine that I'm justified in doing that?
No, I mean, I understand that if you might be worried, but I think that for complete equality to happen, everybody needs to respect everybody and not judge people by the color of their skin.
Even at the expense of the safety of this woman's daughter?
I think she just acted kind of stupid because he didn't show any way he was going to beat her up. He didn't stare at her. He didn't do anything like that. He didn't push or anything like that. So, I mean, I think she was a little overprotective.
Well, honestly, if I was in that situation, I think I would be a little scared. And it's not that I have anything against them, you know, like black people, but I think it's just the way, you know, I was brought up, you know, not like just the kind of society I live in. And I just think that I would honestly have been a little scared.
Tim?
Cornell West, Jesse Jackson, 2 years ago said, you know, I walk down the street, I hear footsteps behind me, I turn around, I'm relieved to see it's white kids. How deeply seated is that fear amongst whites and some blacks that if they see a young black boy on the street, they're in trouble?
Well, I mean, crime is a major problem in American society. Somebody like Jesse Jackson lives under threat of death every day, more from white citizens, from black citizens. We'd have to put in context what he meant by that. So that this issue of, we have to be very honest in terms of the fears that people have, that all of us have, of being attacked, insulted, and even murdered. But on the other hand, the stereotypes, as the young people were saying, are absolutely crucial. They're very real, and unfortunately, we lose sight of the vast majority of young black men who commit no crimes whatsoever. The whole group is shoved into one stereotype.
Senator Bradley, you've heard the kids tonight, you've heard your fellow panelists. What does this country do to heal this racial divide?
I think that the most important thing is to engage somebody of a different race in a discussion about race, and to be candid when you have that discussion, and not to be afraid what the other person might think about your views, with the premise being you're both in pursuit of one thing, which is racial harmony. And then after you have a candid dialogue, you connect that to action in a multiracial setting. The combination of candid dialogue and multiracial action, I think, is what we need to improve race relations in America and to achieve racial healing.
We want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who took part in tonight's Racial Divide Show. Our panelists, our young people, and our partner in this special program, Junior Scholastic.